Be me, Lila. 21, third-year social sciences, the kind of student who can turn a casual conversation into a seminar and still sleep fine afterward. My brain is basically a stack of highlighted PDFs held together with caffeine and moral certainty. I'm active in the campus groups, I volunteer, I share the infographics, I do the calling in and the calling out, depending on how mad I am and how much time I have. I'm not just learning the lens, I'm wearing it like prescription glasses. I can't even look at a hallway poster without clocking the power dynamics. I genuinely believed that made me sharper, better, safer. Like if you could name the system, you could beat it. My older brother Marcus is the opposite of me in every way that counts. He's 23, works an IT job at some forgettable company where the culture is apparently a Slack emoji and a once-a-quarter pizza day. He goes to the gym. He plays games online with his friends. He comes home, eats whatever's in the fridge, showers, and disappears into his room like a polite ghost. He's not ugly. He's not dirty. He's not mean. He's just quiet, and he's single in a way that isn't dramatic. Not heartbroken single. Not always whining single. Just single, like the default setting. That didn't compute for me because my entire timeline, both online and in my head, was full of stories about women drowning in low-effort male attention. Women being overwhelmed. Women needing to dodge, filter, block, endure. So when I looked at Marcus, I didn't see a normal person with a normal life. I saw a contradiction. And because I'm me, I assumed the contradiction meant there was something wrong with him. I started diagnosing him like he was a case study I'd been assigned for credit. I said things I'm not proud of now. Not once, either. Repeatedly, like if you repeat a label enough times it turns into a fact. I told him he was drifting toward incel territory. I told him his passivity was a kind of entitlement. I told him he needed to unpack why he expected connection without participating in the social labor of getting it. I said it with the smugness of someone who thinks she's doing spiritual CPR. Marcus didn't explode or argue. That's the thing. If he'd yelled, I could have filed him neatly into the mental drawer labeled fragile male ego. But he didn't give me that. He would just look at me, tired in the eyes, like he'd stepped on the same loose floorboard for the 100th time. Sometimes he'd say, I'm fine, in that calm voice that always made me feel like I was the one being weird, which, in hindsight, I was. The breaking point came on a night our parents weren't home. I'd invited my friend Rowan over. Rowan is the kind of friend who makes you feel even more correct just by nodding. She studies the same stuff, talks the same language, and can turn "he didn't text back" into a critique of late-stage capitalism if you give her 15 minutes. We made pasta. Marcus ate with us because he's civilized like that. Rowan started talking about a guy in her class, aggressively average. Her words, who somehow always had a new girlfriend. She was laughing, but it was that particular laugh that's half humor and half contempt. The bar for men is on the floor, she said, and women are still out here tripping over it. I looked at Marcus across the table and something in me snapped into place like a puzzle piece. There was my contradiction, sitting there quietly chewing. I couldn't help myself. I didn't even try. I told him, in front of Rowan, that it was genuinely impressive how men could do the absolute minimum and still get dates. And yet he couldn't even manage that. I said it like it was constructive. Rowan jumped in like a hype person, talking about market dynamics on dating apps and how women had the advantage because men outnumber them. Marcus kept eating like we were discussing the weather. Then he said very calmly that apps were a waste of time, that he'd rather go lift or play with his friends than spend his night trying to convince strangers to care. He said it like he was describing brushing his teeth. No emotion, just fact. Rowan rolled her eyes. I felt heat in my face. The way he said it made it sound like women were some kind of hostile audience. I accused him of being defeatist. I told him this is why he was alone. I said he was choosing the void and then blaming the void for being empty. That word, void, hit me wrong. Not because it was offensive, but because it sounded honest. Marcus put his fork down. He looked at me like he'd finally decided to spend one sentence worth of energy on me. You don't know what you're talking about, he said. For Marcus, that was basically a riot. I should have stopped there. I should have taken the rare moment of clarity and walked away. But I don't walk away when I think I'm right. I get louder. So I made it a bet, because humans love turning emotional disagreements into games they can win. I told him, make a profile. 2 weeks. I'll help. I'll run it if I have to. If he gets even one date, he gets to claim I'm wrong and we drop it. If he gets nothing, I'll shut up for 6 months. No lectures. No diagnosing. No incel jokes. Silence. He stared at me for a long time. I could literally watch him calculate the value of 6 months of peace. Then he sighed the sigh of a man signing a surrender treaty. Fine, he said. Rowan practically clapped. I felt victorious. I felt like I just designed an airtight experiment that would finally force reality to obey the theory. We started right away. And this is where I learned something that should have been obvious. Marcus doesn't curate. He exists. His camera roll was tragic. Bad lighting selfies. Group photos where he's a background character. One ancient picture holding a fish like every man on earth is required to do at least once. I made him change shirts. I dragged him outside for decent light. I had him stand with our dog because dogs are basically social proof. Marcus looked like he wanted to evaporate. I told him to stop being dramatic. That this was effort. That this was what women did all the time. I said all of it with the righteousness of someone who had no idea what she was building. Then I wrote the bio. I didn't write his bio. I wrote an advertisement wearing his face. I made him sound witty, stable, kind, and socially aware. I sprinkled in just enough safe guy signaling to make progressive women feel comfortable. I ended with a question to prompt replies. I read it aloud like I was pitching him to a board of investors. Marcus listened, then said, flatly, I would never talk like that. I told him it didn't matter. Nobody talks like their bios. Bios are packaging. Dates are content. I posted it like I was doing him a favor. The first few days were nothing. 0 matches. My confidence started developing tiny hairline cracks. I kept telling myself it was timing, algorithm, bad luck. By day 5 he got a match and I had a full-body surge of vindication like I just proven gravity exists. We crafted a message. Thoughtful. Specific. Friendly. She never replied. Day 7. Another match. The message was a crypto link. A bot. So after a week, my grand experiment had produced 1 ghost and 1 scam. Marcus wasn't even surprised. He just shrugged like the outcome had been waiting there the whole time. I got angry, because anger is easier than admitting you might be wrong. I told him he wasn't swiping enough, that he was sabotaging, that he wasn't putting himself out there properly. He looked at me with a kind of tired patience that made my skin crawl. I'm doing what you told me, he said. This is why I don't do it. That's when I decided I needed a control profile. Because if his profile failed, it could still be him, his vibe, his energy, his whatever. But if a profile I engineered from scratch succeeded, it would prove my theory and also prove he was the variable ruining it. So I created Julian. Julian wasn't a celebrity. I wasn't stupid. Julian was an attractive, believable guy with photos that looked like the kind of life people pretend they have. Smiling. Outdoors. Friends cropped conveniently out. 1 suit shot. 1 casual but hot shot. Like he was a human resume. I wrote Julian's bio like a trap. Creative job. Confident but not cocky. Interesting hobbies that sounded cool but not pretentious. Enough warmth to be safe. Enough edge to be exciting. I built him like a perfect product for a marketplace I thought I understood. Then I started swiping. The phone lit up like I'd set it on a vibrating plate. Matches stacked immediately. Notifications came faster than I could process. Within minutes, it was absurd. The kind of attention that makes you feel drunk on power even though it isn't even yours. I marched into Marcus's room holding the phone out like a trophy. See, I said. This is what it's supposed to look like. He barely glanced away from his screen. Okay, he said. No jealousy. No shock. No wow. Just okay. That annoyed me more than if he'd screamed. I told him he didn't get it. That this proved everything. That his excuses were lazy. That the system worked if you did it right. Marcus finally looked at me. actually looked and said, "You haven't done the hard part." I laughed because it sounded like cope. The hard part, I thought, was getting attention. The hard part was the first step. The gate. The initial barrier. And I'd blown the gate off its hinges. So I went back to my room and sat on my bed, staring at Julian's flood of matches like I'd hacked the universe. I picked a few profiles with real bios. I crafted openers. Not hey, not lazy. I wrote thoughtful, specific messages. I referenced things in their photos, asked real questions, gave little jokes. I did what people always say men should do. Then I waited. Nothing. A few hours. One reply, LOL. That's it. Just LOL. Like a pat on the head. Next day, still mostly nothing. I messaged more people, widening the sample size like I was doing lab work. Out of 20 messages, I got maybe 3 replies. One asked how tall he was. I answered. She disappeared. Another said, haha, and then nothing else. Another replied 4 hours later with one word, work. I started getting that tight feeling in my chest that I usually reserved for reading comment sections under my own posts. The feeling of being ignored while someone still technically has access to you. Like you're performing into a void and the void is bored. I tried switching tactics. I tried flirty. Got, I know when I complimented someone's smile. I tried funny. Got a laughing emoji and silence. I tried being direct. Got nothing. It was like the matches were a museum of people who wanted to be chosen but not bothered. And slowly, embarrassingly, I started noticing things I'd never cared about as a woman on apps. The bios that were just demands. The profiles that had nothing but "don't be boring," and then offered absolutely nothing to work with. The endless expectation that the other person would bring the energy, carry the conversation, entertain, impress, perform, and keep performing until they were rewarded with basic engagement. I would ask a question, get a one-sentence answer, then silence. Like I was interviewing someone who didn't actually want the job but liked the idea of being hired. The scariest part was how fast it started changing me. After a couple days, I could feel my own effort draining away. I understood why men send hey, not because they're stupid, because it's the cheapest possible emotional gamble. You don't pour time into a message just to get ignored. You don't hand someone a carefully wrapped gift so they can leave it on the porch and walk away. Marcus watched me spiraling from the doorway one night. I was on the couch, phone in hand, tapping between dead chats like I was searching for a pulse. Still nothing? He asked. I started ranting because that's my default coping mechanism. I complained that women weren't replying, that the attention was fake, that it was all surface, that it felt like work, that it was humiliating to keep trying. Marcus didn't say I told you so. He didn't even look pleased. He just nodded, like he'd been living in that reality and I'd finally walked into it without a lecture prepared. Yeah, he said. That's why I don't do it. The 2-week deadline approached and the numbers looked stupid. Marcus's profile had barely anything. Julian's had an ocean. But the outcome was the same in the only way that mattered. No dates. No numbers. No real connection. Just the endless treadmill of trying to convince strangers to grant you a crumb of attention. On the last night, I sat there staring at the screen and felt something I didn't expect to feel. Not anger. Not righteousness. Just drained. Marcus came in and sat across from me. No phone. No game. Just him. So, he said gently, steakhouse tomorrow? I looked up at him and I swear that's the first time in months I saw him as a person instead of a problem to solve. I shook my head. Forget it. He waited, quiet, letting me talk if I wanted to. That alone felt weird. Most people either argue back or rush to comfort you. Marcus just existed. I don't get it, I admitted, and my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. I made the perfect guy, like, objectively, and it didn't matter. It's like they don't want to talk. They just want the match. Marcus nodded slowly. It's like interviewing for a job that doesn't even tell you the pay. I laughed once, short and ugly, because it was too accurate. He leaned back and said, that's what I meant by the hard part. Matches aren't hard. The hard part is being ignored 100 times and still convincing yourself it's worth trying again. I didn't have a comeback. No theory. No lens. No quick pivot into but the patriarchy. I had nothing except the quiet, humiliating recognition that I'd been talking about something I didn't understand. I deleted Julian right there, like I was shutting down a machine that had started making a noise I couldn't unhear. For the next week, I didn't bring it up. I didn't joke. I didn't diagnose. I didn't try to fix Marcus. I felt oddly tender toward him, like I'd spent months throwing stones at his window and finally realized he'd been inside the whole time, just trying to keep the glass from shattering. A couple weeks later, I opened my own app and saw a message from a normal-looking guy. One word. Hey! My first instinct was to roll my eyes. The low effort. The audacity. Then my stomach dropped, because I remembered my own fingers hovering over the keyboard as Julian, crafting these perfect openers and watching them die in silence. I remembered how quickly I started conserving energy, how fast I learned not to invest, how hey wasn't arrogance. It was caution, a tiny probe sent out to see if the person on the other side was even real. Marcus walked past and I turned my phone toward him without speaking. He looked at it, then looked at me, and we shared this quiet, grim little understanding that felt more intimate than any lecture I'd ever given him. I still believe what I study. I still think systems shape people. I still think women deal with things men don't. I'm not suddenly cured of my worldview like this is some inspirational montage. But I learned something painfully simple. Sometimes you can be right about the structure and still wrong about the person standing in front of you. Marcus wasn't broken. He wasn't secretly hateful. He wasn't an incel in the making. He was just tired. And he'd decided his time, his dignity, and his sanity were worth more than begging strangers to treat him like a human being for 15 seconds. And the part one hate admitting most is this. The only reason I finally saw it was because I made myself live inside his reality long enough to feel how heavy it is. Not on paper. Not in theory. In your hands, in your chest, in the little humiliations that add up until you stop reaching. I didn't apologize in some dramatic way. I didn't sit him down and cry and make it a big healing moment. That's not how we are. I just stopped. And for the first time in a long time, my brother and I could be in the same room without me turning him into an argument.